Well, here we are again. New spot, same week, but, well, the cogs have been turning quite fast as I sort of mull over what I've been speaking about in the last couple of videos. And this is a good way of talking to people. If I'm being truly honest, I've only spoken to one person personally about this. One person other than you, the rest of the whole world, via the internet. But there is a sort of filter, so I guess that makes it a little bit easier. If I was to speak about what I've been discussing in these videos, pathological demand avoidance, an unusual condition somewhere on the autism spectrum. If I was to discuss that with folk here, well, it would frankly leave them dumbfounded, because where I live, I guess the general view is somewhat more old school and traditional, and certainly people see anything connected with the word autism as a suggestion of at the very least, extreme difficulty navigating the world. And it would be incomprehensible that I could, for example, or other people, them even, be somewhere on that spectrum too, if they felt they, or I, navigated the world with relative ease. But there we are. One of the things I want to talk about today is actually the response when I shared this with someone close to me. And they said, well, whatever you do, you can't use this as a sort of an excuse for continuing to behave or do things the way you currently do. Which sounds a little harsh, but I guess in general, I'm in agreement. The fact that I might or might not have a particularly unusual brain makeup is no reason to suggest that certain ways of responding to situations can't be modified, and treating myself as, in a sense, a victim. No, and that was never my intention. What I would like to do today is explore how this kind of self-knowledge, were it, or in whatever way it might be, true, might unlock the keys to actually a better life, a better way of me being me. Anyway, all that's very vague. Let me just go back to where I was in the last video, when I'd mentioned about my brief brush with death as a newborn baby, and my resurrection, coming back from the dead at my very inception in this world. Amazing stuff. Now, what I'm about to say is obviously not based on any very precise scientific analysis or diagnosis. It's just me trying to make sense of things, and consequently it's lay person speculation at best. But if it serves a purpose, rather like those dreaded placebos, if it works, well, all the more power to it. So this is my understanding of what might have happened, and why I might be a little unusual in some regards. If we look at people who perhaps fall more traditionally into the diagnosis of autism, when people conduct brain scans or close examination, what seems to be very prevalent is that little inner core lizard brain, the amygdala, is overly developed, and there is some sort of damage or abnormality to the prefrontal cortex. And what does that mean as far as I understand? And again, I'm not a neuroscientist, so please forgive me or correct me in the comments below. Well, the amygdala is that sort of emotional fight or flight business. So if it's overdeveloped, one might have a tendency to overreact to certain stimuli. The prefrontal cortex is connected with rational thought. So if it's underdeveloped, it might hinder logical thinking. And if you think about those two statements, they probably fit in, at least in some way, with how we traditionally view the difficulties that autistic people face. But I started to ask myself the important question. Well, in my particular case, in this very rapid, traumatic instant at my birth, what if some damage actually took place in the inevitable starvation of oxygen to my infant brain? But what if it, given the fact that I was fairly rapidly resuscitated, what if it was limited in scope rather than all-encompassing? What if, and this is my hypothesis that I would like to sort of test in a thought experiment, what if my amygdala was overdeveloped, but no damage was done to the prefrontal cortex? Well, that would explain, first of all, that or limited damage, I think it's worth saying. That might explain why I have the ability to reason well, logical reasoning. Or if that damage was maybe only slight, perhaps that would explain why it took me some time to develop more complex language as an infant, sort of in the 0 to 2 or 3 phase. Who knows? On the other hand, a sort of overdeveloped amygdala, if that generates, excessive responses to stress or threat, or in the case of pathological demand avoidance, demands placed on one, well, that could explain both avoidance of carrying things out, instructions, or to some degree tantrums or extreme responses, aggressive responses. And I can kind of see patterns of that with me. Now, pathological demand avoidance is in essence closely connected, it appears from my reading, with anxiety. It's a condition of anxiety. And when I think about what I would have before described in myself as extreme procrastination very often is something that's driven out of either fear or perhaps an unwillingness to engage in an activity that might be perceived as disagreeable. Let's call it that. Well, if I replace those kinds of thoughts with an idea of demands placed on me, by me, on myself, generated by me, if I think of the actual nature of placing that demand as something that generates an enormous amount of anxiety and consequently a sort of extreme emotional response, one way or the other, either a very powerful pushback, the fight, or an equally strong tendency towards avoidance of whatever that demand might be, the flight. And that really does resonate with me. That seems to makes a lot of sense with, how I view myself. So there we are. By the way, if you hear some voices, they are people visiting the house. I don't think they're going to come and speak to me. So they've gone past. The other noises that you might have heard are, the normal comings and goings of trucks. But I'm filming in a slightly different spot, so perhaps that's a bit louder than usual. My apologies. Anyway, that's a big digression because I was somewhat distracted by people walking in front of me. There we are. I don't think that has anything to do with the subject matter at hand. Where was I? Pathological demand avoidance. So it seems to me that irrespective of what a clinical diagnosis by a trained professional or a neuroscientific medical diagnosis, irrespective of what that might suggest, looking at myself through this paradigm, sort of filter or model of how I think, is very, very helpful. And what it suggests to me is that in answer to the question of, are you going to just let this dominate you? Don't let this dominate you, as someone near and dear to me said. You can't use this as an excuse. That certainly isn't my intention. What I can use this whole 3-video analysis as is a powerful clue about how I can conduct myself better in situations. And the starting point is looking at how, at the very initial phase of demand, when that stress is being generated, that anxiety, how might one manage anxiety better? What things can be done? I mean, I know in a response I've had with situations that stressed me out in the past, a simple breathing exercise, I spoke about this before, my dogs barking loudly, drove me absolutely mad when we first got dogs, and of course they were prone to barking because they would bark at other creatures, and there's no shortage of creatures where we live. And I found a sort of very short, meditative, deliberate breathing practice helped me enormously. Perhaps that might help me now when I go and deal with my tax return. I'm not sure. Perhaps meditation is the thing that I need to work on and develop in terms of my daily life practice. Anyway, interesting questions. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And as always, I trust your lives are filled with joy. And until next week, ciao from sunny Brazil.